Hi, I'm Todd Jones, host of the podcast Pressbox Access. Here's a clip from my interview with Peter King. Peter tells us that coming out of college, his intention was to be a news reporter, and he explains how he ended up in sports. Well, you've certainly chronicled the absolute growth of the passion that people have for the NFL. You've done it on so many different platforms, now with NBC Sports, obviously, 29 years at SI, TV, radio, podcasts, a decade at a couple newspapers. Member of the voting panel for the Hall of Fame since '92. You'll be there someday. Dick McCann Memorial Award, on and on. But you mentioned your childhood, and this really is a long way since you and a friend used to write a newspaper as kids, right? In Enfield, Connecticut?
When I was in fifth grade, whenever I go and speak to schools or I spoke to Andrea Kramer's journalism class at Boston University recently, and I've said this 20 times to classes over the years, that I'm really fortunate, probably a lot more fortunate than anybody who's listening to me, because when I was in fifth grade, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And most people, both of my daughters graduated college and didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives. And so I was so fortunate because I started working at it when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I loved reading newspapers. My dad was a huge newspaper reader. I grew up halfway between Boston and New York. And when I was in high school, in fact, in Enfield, Connecticut, I remember going to get the Boston Sunday Globe every week and sitting down and inhaling Peter Gammon's notes columns, because I was a huge baseball fan at the time, and he was just starting out, and I said, how incredible is this, that this guy gets one full newspaper page every week to just empty his notebook and to write about baseball. And I've met Gammons quite a few times, talked to him a few times over the years, but a couple of years ago, I was at Wrigley Field in Chicago just as a fan, and I saw Gammons there. He was there doing something, and I went up to him, reintroduced myself. He goes, "Oh, yeah," and I said, I just want to tell you something. When I was in high school in Enfield, Connecticut, probably the most significant thing that happened to me, honestly, is that I was introduced to your notes column. I read it every week, and I said, that's really what I want to do in whatever business I do. I wasn't even sure I was going to be a sports writer. When I went to Ohio University, I didn't write sports at all. I covered the women's softball team as a freshman when I was a freshman for the school paper, but then sophomore, junior, and senior years, I never wrote one word about sports. Mm-hmm. So I thought that I was going to be I said, to be a cool job, I'd love to cover the State House for the Columbus Dispatch. And seriously.
We would have loved to have had you, Peter.
Seriously, I would have loved it. I would have loved that. And, and maybe one day I could get to the Washington Post or something, or a big paper. But I never really thought of being a sports writer until I got a call from a fellow named Frank Hinchy, who was the new sports editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer in 1980, and he wanted to know if I wanted to be a general assignment reporter in the sports department. I said, hell yeah. So
yeah, Frank's actually a friend of mine, and I worked with him in Columbus, so you learned well from Frank Hinchy.
Yeah, he was tough, but I really liked him. He was my boss at the Kentucky bureau of the Cincinnati Enquirer when I was an intern. And so, anyway, but I didn't have to be a sports writer. It's been fun, and I'm glad it worked out that way, but I could definitely have seen my life going in another direction, and I definitely could have seen myself covering politics or doing something for a paper, and who knows, a website, because, hey, look, Todd, when we were kids, we thought we'd be working for newspapers for 45 years and
retiring and, having worked for newspapers our whole career.
Yeah, it was like the mob. Once you got in, you were in.
Yeah, and it just, life changed,